Serious, Redditors who have killed another person for any reason. How did it feel and how do you cope with it? Did armed security in a bad city, was a mall cop. Guy came running through the class door high as hell on PCP, he grabbed some glass and started swinging at people. He struck a female shopper with it, gashed her face up. I unholstered my firearm. I remember firing my gun, but not how many rounds or much thereafter. Guy made a death gurgle that I can still hear to this day. I don't remember anything else. Yell drop it, get shot, I'll shoot you dead, stop. I did watch my body cam after with the cops. I fired 4 rounds of .40 SW. One hit the torso, nothing. Another, nothing. Third round, he staggered, he regained his balance, last one to the head. He dropped. At first I was having a panic attack inside. I remember the cops, I knew them on a first name basis as I've needed their help numerous times. I don't remember this, but the first officer grabbed my firearm and told me to sit down. The lifeless corpse looked like a dead weight, the person there, but he wasn't, he disappeared. His life was gone. I remember the smell of iron, blood, gunpowder, and metal. It all felt so surreal. I never thought something like that would happen. I was cleared of charges. I have nightmares of dropping my gun as he charged, wake up in a dead sweat. The sound of his death gurgle has never left me. I felt like my world was coming to an end. I felt so dirty, so wrong. I just took a person's life. I killed somebody. I keep thinking, maybe I should have tasered him, should have done something different. How I cope? Meetings, talking it out, support structure. I hit a child with my car a few years ago and they died almost instantly. I'd been driving for less than a year at that point and I was driving through a neighborhood that had lots of cars parked on the side of the road. A 4-year-old kid ran out in front of my car and I had less than a second to stop. I bumped her pretty hard and she was knocked over. She hit her head on the pavement and, apparently, died instantly. I went numb. My surroundings suddenly started fading and I almost passed out. As I got out of the car, I saw her blood all over the road, and I vomited everywhere. Her mum came over screaming. It's the worst sound I've ever heard. The police saw that there was literally nothing I could have done and let me go. As for dealing with it, I did an ''t/don't do it well. The first 6 months after it happened I was either drunk or high on painkillers and weed almost 90% of the time because it was the only thing that made me forget what I'd done. Then I stopped drinking and replaced it for self-harm, and continued doing drugs for about 2 years. I'd go through the moment thousands of times in my mind. I had dreams about it. I barely slept. I'd dealt with depression before this point, but this just made it so much worse. Then one day, her mum shows up at my house and wants to talk to me. In all honesty, the initial thought that went through my head when I first realized it was her was, oh shit. She's here to kill me and get revenge, which was then followed by I hope she does it so I don't have to live with the guilt anymore. She hadn't come to do that, she'd come to forgive me. She told me that it was hard for her to do, but she ultimately realized that my killing her daughter wasn't my fault. I burst into tears and hugged her for a solid minute while we both cried our eyes out. Even now, 3 years later, I still think about it every day. I still hate myself, I still have depression, and I'm still suicidal. I don't know how to deal with it. But I'm still here, I guess. I just sort of see this as my eternal hell. TL, doctor accidentally ran over a kid. Used unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with it. Her mom forgave me. I still haven't forgiven myself, and it's unlikely that I ever will. Edit, wording. Second edit, I never expected anyone to really even read this post, to be honest. Thank you all for your kind comments. They mean a lot. My dad was a long-term alcoholic with brain damage from the alcoholism and a related accident. He committed suicide slowly, locked himself up in a motel room and drank himself to death. I knew what he was doing because he told me. I asked him if he wanted me to call emergency services and he said no, they might try to save me. I never made that call. A few days later I got the call saying housekeeping found him in the motel room surrounded by empty vodka bottles. I do feel guilty for not intervening, but I know it's what he wanted. There was no hope of recovery and he was in his final stages of alcoholism. I loved him very, very much, too much to watch him suffer anymore. A lot different from the posts so far, but I at least feel somewhat responsible. My grandpa was a troubled person. He had severe PTSD from war, and had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I was 14 when I found out my grandma was divorcing him because he wouldn't get help and was never taking his meds. Basically she was completely drained and he didn't care. I was at the house when he came up to me and asked if I wanted to go hang out, help him with the garden. We used to do it all the time and I did love hanging out with him. I didn't want to then because I was lazy and it was summer, and I just wanted to stay inside on the computer because it was Sunday and I wanted to relax before school. He was really upset I didn't want to spend time with him but told me he was sorry for the situation with him and my grandma, and that he would always love me. The next day I got picked up from school and found out he shot himself. Apparently after I talked to him he went and got his gun. He waited until the next day when my grandma was at work and he was alone and shot himself. I know it's not my fault, and it is common for everyone close to someone who commits suicide to blame themselves. Rationally I know all of this, but even almost 10 years later I still replay the day in my head. Maybe if anything I could have just spent one more day with him. He was troubled, but also one of the kindest people I knew. There were so many signs that he was suicidal but nobody did anything. Quick edit, it was summer and the first month of school. It was hot and I wanted to be in the house with air conditioning. I'm a ECHO nurse. On average once a month I switch off someone's ventilator and life support systems, meds. I always cry. I just do my best to try and support the family, but it takes a little of my soul every time. I was 17 or 18 at the time. I was going to school at my local community college to get my high school diploma. I didn't do well at my high school, so this was a good alternative. Drugs and alcohol and friends got in the way at my high school. I was always looking for ways to get high or drunk. I had a pretty good supply of prescription medications I was able to get my hands on as well. At the time Oxy was hitting the scene pretty heavily in my neighborhood and with all my friends. Before too long I became interested. So with a way to get the money for the $70 pill, I got a bunch of the meds and sold them an adult acquaintance. I went through with buying the Oxy and so began my downward spiral of addiction. That's a story of its own. I went and got high with friends and went on as normal. Sometime in the following days I was at school and I got a call from an old girlfriend at my old high school saying that the person I had sold the meds to had died and there were texts from me in his phone. She had told me that word was going around that I was going to go to jail for manslaughter. I was instantly in shock. The shittiest thing is that I had a presentation that would determine if I could continue in the program to get my diploma. I could hardly gather myself to finish the day. I barely made it through, but I was able to get it done. After I got home I spent the next month or two avoiding everyone. Everyone I heard a car drive by my house my heart would drop and I knew I was going to jail or prison. No one ever came. I was never contacted by anyone to this day. I slowly started to leave my house again and see my friends. A friend from my high school was best friends with the guy. I avoided him at all cost. Until one day it was unavoidable. He came up and we started talking about the situation. I couldn't even look at him. After all of my worry, he told me he held no hard feelings towards me. He told me that this guy was an adult who decided to get high on these meds and drink extensively, then got behind the wheel. I still don't know all the details, but that whole ordeal screwed me up for a long time. I continued to use drugs for a long time. Like I said, that's a story of its own. I now have 5+ years clean and live a great family life with my girlfriend and child. I felt the side of his skull collapse and massive sigh of relief. Guy tried to mug me, pulled me into an alley and kicked me to the ground. I landed on some piping and swung it blindly as hard as I could. Guy dropped to the ground and the right half of his face was caved in. The police came and let me go. I guess the guy was a repeat offender because one of the officers recognized him, took my report and let me go home. I don't really talk about it unless it gets brought up. I'm not some big dude or anything, I'm like 5 feet 6 inches with a dad body. I just got really lucky. Edit. Wow, most upvotes I've ever seen. I'm no Agent 47 or Terminator. I'm just a guy that's seen enough that one dead guy doesn't bother me too much. I don't really want to go into my whole life story right now. If you feel like going in depth, you can probably glean bits and pieces from my past comments. You'll see I'm just your average nobody. Also, I like guinea pigs. He had dragged a young woman into a park in the early hours and tried to rape her a couple of times, but she had fought him off. I was walking home and by the time I had stumbled across them, he had tried to throw her off a bridge. She was desperately clinging to side while hanging off the other side of the rail. At the time I felt nothing because our altercation took mere seconds to surprise him, throw him over, and pull her up. Over the next several months, coping with it was simply making sure she was okay and being there if she needed someone to talk to. Long term, my feelings have always been he made the decision to hurt someone on his own. He lost the basic courtesy and respect all people deserve and need to earn. It was not possible to rehabilitate him in that moment. I had more worries about the bugs I may have walked on while in the park. She was by far my main concern. We both lied a little when the cops turned up. I would do it again if needed, although maybe I would chat less to random strangers at the train station about silly things before walking home so that I would have arrived at the park earlier and maybe stopped the whole terrible ordeal happening to her in the first place. I shot and killed a man who broke into my home and shot me with my own shotgun. This is the first time I have written about it here, and I'm not sure I'm gonna leave it up. I live in a ranch, but it's close enough to the outskirts of civilization that the worst part of it often wash up on my property. This was over 20 years ago. I was in my garage doing some cleaning and I heard the back door being kicked in. I had all the lights in the house off and the garage had no windows, so I assumed they didn't knew I was home. The back door didn't connect to my kitchen but to a room I used as a kind of office, and that room was connected to the garage I was in. I kept my guns in that office. But I'm not the brightest of individuals and I thought if I rushed now I could hold up whomever it was before he or they got to the guns. Stupid mistake in retrospect, because I usually kept a loaded shotgun hanging from the wall just a few feet away from the broken door. I kicked the garage office door open and lo and behold, a bearded crackhead missing his front teeth is standing there with the lights on, giant ass grin on his face, my gun pointed at me. I said to put him up and he did a rebel yell. And then he shot me. I felt the father of all body punches hit me and shoved me back into a window. My legs gave and I went down like a tree, back and sideways into the glass and window frame, bouncing my ass on the windowsill and falling on the floor. I'm not sure how fast it actually went, because as I hit the floor I saw him lower the gun. I think he believed he had killed me. I lined up my right arm and fired my revolver once, not aiming really. I saw the giant fireball out of my gun and then him lift up somewhat from the ground. I hit him center mass with a .357 Magnum, and he never got up again. He had shot me in the left groin, belly area with 12 gigaamperes number 4 buckshot. Most of the shot missing. Otherwise I guess I'd have no hip left. Still, the shot nicked my femoral artery, and penetrated into my lower abdomen as well, later revealed to have hit my kidney and hip bones. Sat there for what seemed like an eternity. In reality, it had all taken place under 2 to 5 minutes closing parenthesis, watching a pool of blood form under me and my skin turn white, and for some reason hallucinating heavily, hearing voices and seeing faces and shapes wander in and out of the walls. I felt real tired and the coldest I had ever been in my life. I felt the urge to get up, but my body wasn't answering. I knew I was going into shock and soon I'd be dead, because police response time was over an hour here back then. Said my goodbyes in my head, decided life so far had been fun and worth living, then closed my eyes. Woke up nearly a month later in a hospital with the mother of all headaches and looking like the Frankenstein monster, left side from the waist down, stitched and stapled all over. Skin turning shades of purple and green, giant surgical drain coming out of where part of my hip bone had been. As for what I felt, I'll never forget that man and he'll never leave me, regardless of the upturns my life took afterwards. Many might consider me less manly for saying this, but the fear and paranoia of having this happen to you again never really leaves you, and I do feel it took something from me, not innocence, but some kind of naivety about life. For years I couldn't take corners or enter empty rooms in my own house without mentally preparing myself for a fight. There was a time I couldn't get up from bed at night to get a glass of water without taking a loaded gun with me, just in case. Every night when I lay on my left side I'm reminded of him. So, in a weird way, even though I don't hate him, and even though I don't want to remember, he is forever in my mind. Copy and paste from my reply to another poster. I learned later that my neighbor and his door showed up. He is a vet, got ice bags from my fridge and stuffed in around the wounds to slow blood flow, then stuffed rags into the wounds and fashioned a tourniquet around my leg. His daughter had an EpiPen case for her allergies, so he fetched it and shot it into me to prevent my heart from stopping. I don't know if you'd say I killed her or not, but it felt like it. I was working PRN as a nurse at a nursing home. It was Christmas morning and I was only working until noon. I had split the day with another nurse so we could both see our families on Christmas. I had assessed a patient who was 92 years old and thought she might be coming down with pneumonia. I didn't have time to call the doctor to get a chest x-ray order and instead reported it off to the nurse that came in. I was in a hurry to leave because I promised my family I'd be home by 1 o'clock. The nurse never called the doctor and forgot to report it to the next shift. She died 2 days later. It crushed me. I try to make a point to never leave work for the next shift, and that instance just hit me so hard as to why you follow through with unusual assessments and nursing intuition. It hurts to think about. I know she was 92, but it's still hard when you think something could have been done. It's not as hard to lose patience with you can confidently say you did everything you could. Thank you for watching all the way until the end of the video. If you were at all entertained, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for future content. Stay safe everyone, until next time.